All right, and some breaking news now. Israeli politicians have just now passed bills to ban the UN agency for Palestinian refugees from operating within Israel. Now, this will have significant repercussions. It will restrict UNRWA's activities across the occupied East Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank. 7 countries, including the UK, France, Canada and Germany, issued a joint statement expressing their grave concern over Israel's plans. Now, Israel has repeatedly targeted UNRWA during its war on Gaza in an effort to dismantle the agency. Now, as this bill's passed, just a reminder that nearly the entire population in Gaza relies on UNRWA for their basic needs. Let's take a closer look at the organization. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees was created in 1949 to support Palestinians forcibly displaced in 1948. And that was because of the creation of Israel, known by Palestinians as the Nakba or catastrophe. Today, it supports nearly 6 million Palestinian refugees in 58 camps across Gaza, the occupied West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon and Syria. As of last year, 545,000 children were enrolled in UNRWA's 709 schools. And the agency also runs 140 primary healthcare facilities. More than 30,000 Palestinians work for the agency, and that's across the Middle East. And UNRWA also encourages and supports the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their homeland, as stipulated in the UN General Assembly Resolution 194, which Israel rejects. Right, Marwan Bishara is Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. He's joining us now in Doha. Marwan, you've been monitoring this bill, and I imagine you're not surprised that it's been passed.
Oh, I'm not surprised at all. Already we've seen the writing on the wall. These 2 bills, the bills that concerns Israel and occupied East Jerusalem, that, as we all know, was annexed to Israel illegally, and the one that concerns the occupied territories, West Bank and Gaza, have been backed by 100 Knesset members, 100 Israel parliamentarians. So you can imagine if the original bill was backed and sponsored by 100 out of 120. I mean, this just goes to tell you not only that this is not coincidental, not only that this is not, a question of wait and see, that the roots of fascism in Israel are so deep that an absolute majority of the Israeli parliament, more than 100 out of 120, and if you count some 11 or 12 Arab parliamentarians, we're talking about something like 90% of the Israeli parliament backs this anti-UN, anti-UNRWA, anti-international law, in fact, unfriendly bill that has been basically criticized by all of Israel's allies in the West. So not surprised at all. In fact, quite worried at this point in time.
Right, and that worry is a very fair point, because UNRWA is an agency that has an international mandate. It has international funding. So how does Israel have the power to outlaw such a United Nations agency? Does its domestic law supersede this international law that governs such an agency?
Well, most countries would tell you it does, of course. But here we are talking, and this is what really concerns us most, is about occupied territories. I really couldn't care less, and I think most of the world couldn't care less what happens with UNRWA in Tel Aviv, right? A majority, the Jewish city in Israel. But when it comes to East Jerusalem, West Bank, and especially Gaza today, we're talking about the livelihood of millions of people. And as Noor was reporting earlier, there is no alternative to UNRWA. Anyone that speaks about increasing humanitarian aid or allowing humanitarian aid to the starving people in Gaza, for example, wouldn't be able to get anything to anywhere in Gaza without the network that UNRWA has had developed over many decades. There is no alternative today, and there will be no alternative anytime in the near future, because it took decades for UNRWA and thousands upon thousands of employees, on 13,000 alone in Gaza, to be able to do the work that UNRWA does in terms of distributing food, in terms of hospitals, in terms of schools, and so on and so forth. So this goes to the very heart of what it means to be a living Palestinian today. And in that sense, this law is meant to be capping the genocide that Israel carries today. This is not a mere hostility towards a United Nations agency. This is a direct assault on top of the genocide that's been carried in order to ensure that genocide is implemented 100%. So while everyone in the world is calling for increased humanitarian aid to Gaza, now Israel is making sure that there is no UNRWA to distribute that food. Now, just quickly on the response of Western powers, and this is, again, one cannot be surprised, right? They are deeply concerned, right? I am deeply concerned about they're deeply concerned, because we know that this is total BS. This whole, Western reaction to an Israel carrying such a decision that goes to the heart of its war crimes in Gaza that the West continues to support and is complicit in. So for Western officials to be worried about Israel's reputation, as if it has any reputation left, rather than to be worried about the livelihood of millions of Palestinians, it's utterly shameless and cowardly on the part of Western powers to react this way to a legislation that is meant to hurt hundreds of thousands of children.
And to add to your point there, Marwan, the bill doesn't provide any alternatives for the provision of aid. Ultimately, what is the broader picture of essentially removing UNRWA from the landscape, removing them from assisting Palestinians? Does this add to the argument around ethnic cleansing?
Genocide. It's a genocide, plain and simple. I think the ICJ should be watching for what the Israelis are saying and they are doing. It's basically every day in Israel parliament, in Israel government, every day in Israeli military operations in Gaza is more and more evidence that goes to the International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice against Gallant and Netanyahu for the war crimes and against Israel for its carrying genocide against the Palestinian people. So there is no doubt on the immediate, on the short term, that this is meant to starve. This is meant to undo the Palestinian people. This is meant to kill Palestinian children. There is no other way of looking at it. Today, there is no alternative to UNRWA to feed Palestinian children. When you cut that, you are actually saying, I am there purposefully killing Palestinian children, millions of them. There is no questions about that. Now, this is the immediate run. On the long run, strategically speaking, what Israel is doing is basically undoing the UN agency that takes care of Palestinian refugees. The Palestinian refugees are Israel's original sin. It's what they did to the Palestinian people in order to build Israel. It was erected on the demolition, on the destruction, on the ashes of the Palestinian people, creating the refugee problem. They think that by doing away with UNRWA, they will do away with the refugee problem that has really been taking care of almost 4 million Palestinian refugees and their descendants. So this is the long-term strategy of Israel. I don't think it's going to work, but clearly there is so much sadism in the Israeli parliament and so much cowardly attitude by Western powers that back Israel, that this thing continues unabated, hurting Palestinians and complicating the resolution of any aspect of this problem, of the problem of the occupation and the dispossession of the Palestinians.
And Marwan, at this point, I think it would be important to look at the foundation of Israel passing these bills. Israel has accused UNRWA members of having ties to Hamas, accused UNRWA members of participating in the attack on October 7th, but at no point providing any credible evidence. In fact, this has been discredited.
one cannot overestimate this problem. One cannot overstate this issue. One cannot overemphasize this point that you just made, because we've been going at it for a whole year now. As a media, as a journalistic institution that we are, we continuously probe, question, try to verify, quote, cite, and so on and so forth, right? Investigate and so on and so forth. For a whole year, we've been debunking the myths that Israel creates every day. But Israel is like a myth-creating machine. It continues to manufacture lies like there is no tomorrow, right? So every day it manufactures new myths. Yesterday they were saying that Sinwar's guard was an UNRWA staff. Of course, UNRWA had to look into it. It took days. It turned out that this person that they're talking about actually lives in Egypt. They had to do that. I don't need to do that. I think we as an organization, we need to stop doing that. Because we know and we've seen not once, not twice, not 10 times, not 20, not 100, not 1,000 times, how Israel lies about what it's doing in Gaza, how Israel lies about Hamas being under hospitals and in hospitals and over hospitals and next to children in kindergarten. It's just all of these allegations, none of them proven, all of them debunked. Unfortunately, repeated by Western officials like the likes of Antony Blinken of the United States and others. And
right, we seem to have lost Marwan Bishara. The connection seems to be weak, but we will be speaking to him again at some point. That's Marwan Bishara. He's Al Jazeera senior political analyst, and he's in Doha.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.